Okay, welcome to AYM. So, of course, before we get started, I'm going to open this up with a word of prayer. We always want to invite God into our presence. So, if we can bow our heads and close our eyes, please. Dear God, thank you for this wonderful day, Lord. Thank you for just being here in the midst of us, Lord. Thank you for just giving us the opportunity to gather and learn more about you or how we can protect ourselves and others around us and to reflect your life in our daily walk, Lord. Please be with the speaker and to help us to learn and take something away and be able to spread that to others as well, Lord. In Jesus' name, amen. Amen. So like I was saying, just welcome to our AYM. Thank you for coming. We have been very intentional about having AYM every week except for the first weekend of each month. So after the second, third, and fourth Sabbath of every month, we're going to have AY. And with that being said, we like to have guest speakers and different people come in order to teach us something. So with that being said, I'm going to let our AY leader, Sister Erin, which is also her birthday, to introduce our speaker for us.
Good afternoon, everyone. Happy Sabbath. So if you all did not know, this month is Human Traffic Awareness Month, and we wanted to bring in someone to speak to us about that, to bring awareness to human trafficking, because this happens closer than you think it is, right in our home in Charlotte, in Concord, nearby, Hickory, wherever. We have these situations, and we want to make sure that we bring awareness to ourselves to make sure we stay away from being in that situation or somebody else that we know. So without further ado, we have Cami Biastes from Present Age Ministries, which is in Concord, North Carolina. She's going to be here. She's a community director there, and she's going to come to us today to speak to us about human trafficking. Excuse me? Did I hear what he said? Okay. So as they prepare the presentation, let's ask Ms. Cami to come on up. So prepare yourself.
Thank you. Thank you all for being here. Thanks for letting me be here. Y'all keep doing your thing, and I'll just keep talking until we get there, eh? So I'm Cami Biastes. You can call me Cami B. It's a complicated one, and there's a lot of vowels in there, so it's all good, Cami B, right? It's a pleasure to be with you guys today. I've been at Present Age Ministries for about 5 years. So for 3 years, I was a volunteer, and I did exactly this. You know, they always say, like, find the job that's like your dream job, right? Find the thing you would do for free. Like, I literally did, and now I get to do it not for free, right? It's awesome. So I literally have my dream job. It's awesome. I love being here. I love being in this area of town. I live not too far from here, and I work even closer. So I'm really thankful to be here with you guys. Who lives in 28216? Hey, okay, I got one. All right, how about you guys? Where are you guys? 13? Okay. 28269. Okay, perfect. So if y'all don't know, January 11th is National Day Against Human Trafficking. So what happens on this day? Every year it's a little different, but we try to boost the awareness, right? Like, human trafficking really is a problem, and it's really a problem here. So how do we make sure everybody knows that? Well, this year we did something special, right? We can give our opinion all day. We can tell people this happens, but when data speaks, it speaks loud, right? So this year we brought numbers to the community. So we put together this data report of 3 years worth of data. Like, we've had a client from here, and we've had a client from here. And so now we have zip code-based data, right? So around Mecklenburg County specifically, we were really looking around Concord, same thing. We have specific data to prove this is happening. So if you're interested, it's online. If you don't feel like reading a 25-page report, short version, it's happening, right? And also there's some graphs and pie charts, so if you're into that, like, you can go find it there. But it's on our website. You're welcome to find it there. I'm just going to go ahead and get started, and then we'll catch up on the presentation when it gets going. So at Present Age Ministries, have you all heard of us before? Okay, a little bit. All right, so if you don't know who we are or what we do, we've been around for about 13 years, and we primarily work with teen girls that have been sexually abused, exploited, or trafficked. Really light work, right? Light stuff. So I know we're in the worship center here, we're in church, but we're going to talk about some heavy stuff, okay? And here's the thing, that God is the answer. right? Jesus is the answer, period. And so whatever the problem, this is a place we should be able to talk about it, right? So we're going to say a few things that might make you cringe in church, but I'm telling you, like, the God is in the midst of it, right? And we have to be able to have hard conversations here. This is the place to do that, right? This is where the answers are anyway, so let's have those conversations here. So for my friends, if I walk too far outside range, you just let me know and I'll circle back up here. But how many of you understand abuse? Most of us kind of have a context of that word, right? What that means. So we won't spend too much time on that. But if I asked you what is exploitation or what is trafficking, I guarantee I will get many different answers, probably almost as many as in this room. So we'll talk about those definitions a little bit. We're going to talk about the law a little bit, which sometimes is not fun, but reality is it's probably surprising. And so if we don't know what human trafficking is, by the time we're done with this, I'm betting you're going to be surprised and you're going to know some situations, right? And then maybe at the end of this, we want to talk through some stuff, and that's totally fine. That's what we're here for, right? So thank you, friends, for getting this going for me. Y'all are amazing up there. So when we're talking about abuse, exploitation, and trafficking, now at present age, we work primarily with teen girls. That does not mean this does not happen to boys and men. It absolutely does. Just in our local community, this is what we primarily focus on. This is what we feel like God has called us to do. So that's what we're focusing on. So within our programming at present age, we'll just go through that real quick. We focus on 3 main pillars. The first one being awareness, right? If we don't know what human trafficking is, how are we going to stop it, right? That's where we get to do fun stuff like this. Then we do prevention, where we actually try to get ahead of it. So we primarily work with teenagers, that's like 12 to 18-ish, right? Sometimes younger, sometimes a little older, depending on the situation. But primarily we work with teenagers, and so if we can get ahead of it, and we can talk about what this is and how to protect yourself, even better, right? So we'll go into schools, we'll have these conversations, and then let's just play that out, right? So let's say we go to a school and we start talking, right? So one time I was talking to a 13-year-old girl, and this is a while back, but we were just talking, and she started sharing with me some things going on at home, right? And she wasn't trying to manipulate me, she was actually confiding in me. And so I said, okay, well, let me just ask you straight up. Like, are you being abused at home? No. Okay. Are you being hit, kicked, slapped? Oh, yeah. Okay. Right? So for those of us a little older in the room or maybe familiar with that language, we know I just asked the same question twice, right? But for her, that wasn't the same question. Abuse is one of those things that happens to other people, or maybe it's the one-off thing, but this is my daily life, so that's not abuse, right? And so what we do is when we go into schools, we have to use language like that. What does the young people need to hear, right? How do they communicate these things, and how do we communicate to them in a way that they can actually hear it? If I say, oh, are you trafficked? No one's going to say yes, right? And so we can't talk that way. And so sometimes we get to do trainings for the community and teach other community members like law enforcement or medical providers. You also can't ask the question like that, right? That's not going to help anybody. So learning those things have really helped us. But let's say we go to a school, we start talking about here's what exploitation is, here's what trafficking is, and then we have someone who goes, now that I know what I'm looking at, I'm a little bit concerned about my friend. Or maybe someone says, well, now that I know the definitions of all of this, I got to talk to somebody. I got something going on that I need to tell someone. Then what do we do? Good luck, right? No. No, that's where we provide wraparound services, right? If it's something clear enough that we identify this is trafficking, perfect. We can get involved. Let's do some stuff, right? We call who we need to call, get some services in place, all that good stuff. But what if it's not very clear? Well, I think there's something going on with this girl. There's a lot of vulnerabilities or warning signs. Maybe a teacher identifies something or a student about their friend. What we created is basically a part 2 of our prevention program. So it's an 8-week series for vulnerable teen girls. It's awesome. It's actually super fun. It's one of my favorite things that we do. But that's a little bit of the services at present age. When we do have someone who is identified as trafficked, usually, everyone always asks, where do those referrals come from? Who's actually telling you this? Everybody, right? So when I come and I talk to you and we talk about what human trafficking is, you have full permission to contact us if you need help or you know someone who does, right? Our referrals come from everybody. So sometimes that's law enforcement, police, sometimes that's healthcare workers, sometimes that's social workers, sometimes school educators, everywhere, right? But what we do know is those individuals do not self-identify. They aren't coming up to you and say, oh my gosh, I need help, right? Especially if you're law enforcement or you're one of those people who could actually do something, right? And so what that means is as a community, I need your eyes and ears out there. I need you looking out for your friends. I need you looking out for your neighbors. I need you to do these things because that individual is probably not able to get help for themselves. We'll talk about why in a little bit. So this slide here, I'm not going to read you everything. We ain't got time for that or passion for that. But the point is we did not wake up today and start doing this. That's my point in telling you. We sit on local task forces, statewide task forces. We have regional influence as well. And so my point is we didn't wake up this morning and say, hey, we are going to fight trafficking, right? We've been doing this for a long time in this community. We're 13 years old now. We're officially a teenager, right? But we've been here for some time. So let's talk about human trafficking. One of the common things that we see is a lot of misidentification, right? A lot of prostitution, right? Prostitution in this, it kind of got a little murky in there somewhere. The other one that gets real murky is smuggling, right? Where you're brought over the border of a country. It doesn't necessarily mean trafficking, and so we'll define those a little bit. How many of you all have seen the movie Taken? We're throwing back a little bit, yeah. Okay, so if you haven't seen the movie, essentially Liam Neeson here, his daughter gets, she goes overseas, she's in a foreign country, she gets kidnapped, right? Bag over the head, woof, pulled away out of the room, escorted into another country, so smuggled over the border, and then sold for commercial sex. Is that human trafficking? Absolutely it is. Is that what human trafficking looks like around here? Sure isn't, right? And Liam Neeson sure isn't hanging out in Concord, North Carolina, right? And so what we like to do is just clarify real quick at the beginning what it's not. Sometimes we have this mentality that it's kidnappings, it's all of these things, and sometimes there's rumors going around town. You gotta watch out for that Target, that Walmart, that creepy white van, right? But majority of our girls, the clients that we actually work with, don't have those stories. And so that's really helpful for us to know. The second and third picture here, we actually used to use these in our marketing quite a bit because they're very emotionally charged, right? If you see somebody in chains, you want to fight and you want to do something, right? Unacceptable, period, right? But reality is a lot of our people are going to school, they're going to jobs, they're out in the world where you're going to see them. It's actually pretty rare to have that situation of 30 individuals tied up in the basement. You know what I mean? We hear those kind of things on the news, and not to say that doesn't happen, because it does. But that's not most common by far in our area. So when we can understand that, we start to see a little bit more accurately what's going on. So we won't go through this too much, but just so you know, we do have that word trafficker. Sometimes pimp fits that. Also, perpetrator is usually my favorite. That's my go-to. We also have that victim and survivor and client. All of those words are synonymous, and I'll tell you why we use them all. So if I am partnering with law enforcement, right? And I'm talking about my individual who was the victim of the crime, right? This was a trafficked person. If I say survivor, law enforcement says everybody survived. Who are we talking about, right? That's not actually going to be helpful for them. So that's when we use, okay, well, this is the victim of the crime, right? Victim in this situation. But is that really empowering to be told your whole life you're a victim? Nope. Right? And we believe in a healing Jesus, right? We believe in a healing God, and so you're not going to stay there, right? And so then we may use survivor or thriver or whatever that individual prefers, right? And we're going to use different language that way. If we're talking to somebody else in the community, we might use the word client. That might be the best fit because it's our client, they're receiving services, maybe our counselors or our social workers, you know, that kind of thing. So I'll probably use all of those terms tonight. How many of y'all have heard the term John? Are we familiar with that one? Not like a John Doe. That's exactly why I asked. I'm glad you said that. So this John is a buyer of commercial sex. So maybe you hear this in kind of prostitution language, you know, that kind of thing, street language. Sometimes you'll hear this, right? But in this case, we're not talking about a John Doe. We're talking about someone who is buying, who is purchasing commercial sex. So John is a common name. That is exactly one reason why I don't like using the term John. Another one is, how many of y'all know somebody named John? Right. So really what we're doing is normalizing this, right? Like, I got some really cool people in my life named John, right? They're not out here doing this, buying commercial sex, right? And so I don't want this to become a normal thing. So I'm not using that term John, right? It shouldn't be a normal thing. And then last one here, prostitution. What I want to highlight about this one is we work with teens, right? We work with those under the age of 18. Legally, in the United States, by federal law and state law, a child cannot prostitute themselves. Legally, they cannot. The child does not have a choice to do this. And so it is illegal. A child cannot be a prostitute. If we have more conversations about that after, happy to talk through it with you. But I want to make that part clear. So the other thing here is, if present age has worked with one client, one girl, who says, you know, I have 10 to 15 people who will purchase me for commercial sex a day or a night, that means there's 10 to 15 people out there purchasing in our community. Present age has worked with over 400 girls. Do that math. It's not looking good, right? We need Jesus, eh? Right? But what we have to do is also address that. Someone kind of explained it to me this way. You know how in North Carolina, y'all, I ain't from here, so let me be honest. In North Carolina, when you hear the threat of a storm coming, y'all go to the store, buy up all the bread, get all the milk, get all the eggs. Like, it's gone. Like, y'all, what are you doing? Like, it's not even going to snow. It's okay, you know? But what happens? Realistically, generally, that store is going to bring more bread, more milk, more eggs, right? Generally, that's the case. So what we're seeing in human trafficking is we can pull girls off the street all day. We can go get them and get them out of these situations. But as long as there's a demand for it, that supply is going to be there. It's ignorant of us to think we can solve this problem without addressing the demand of it. Now, that's a whole different conversation and different presentation. We can talk about that later, too, if we want to. So there are different types of human trafficking. So we have sex trafficking and labor trafficking. And if you want to get really into it, by the global definition, there's a third one, which is organ harvesting. Yeah, not super common in our area, good news, right? Sex trafficking is the most common in our area, and then labor trafficking. So all of them do happen. So let's talk about the law. That's always fun, right? Okay, but actually it is helpful to know. So by the federal law, the TVPA was passed in 2000, so over 20 years ago, right, this law was passed. And basically what happens, this law states two things. Human trafficking is illegal, right, and it's illegal for minors in a very different way. So the North Carolina law says the same thing. Basically, if you are over the age of 18, we have to be able to prove force, fraud, or coercion in this situation. For those under the age of 18, we do not. Any exchange for something of value is automatically trafficking for those under the age of 18. So we're going to define that a little bit more here in a minute. But what I do want to point out also, the North Carolina law takes it a little bit farther than the federal law. It makes it very clear that if you are that buyer, or if you are that John, right, that term, if you are on that side of things and you say, oh, I didn't know she was underage, the law clearly says does not matter. Mistaking of age is not a defense to prosecution. So that should scare you a little bit, especially if you're here in our local area. Our district attorney's offices sometimes will go after that, right? So let that one sink in. The other thing here, consent of a minor is not a defense. Well, she wanted to, right? Or he wanted to. Doesn't make a difference. The law clearly states that. So, yeah. So prostitution is illegal, yes. So what we're talking right here is kind of more on the prosecution side. How can you be charged? So is it illegal? Yes. Yes, it is. Great point. Great point. Yes, none of this is legal. So let's talk about those definitions a little bit, and I'll give you a little bit of stories to make sure that we understand what we're talking about here and how this works in our local area. Again, we're not really seeing kidnappings. Out of the 400 plus girls we've worked with, less than 5 have this story of originally being kidnapped. Isn't that crazy? But what we do see a little bit more than that force option is fraud and coercion. So again, for those under the age of 18, we don't have to have this evidence of force, fraud, and coercion for it to be human trafficking. For those over the age of 18, we do. We do need to show these things. So force, most of us can grasp what that means, right? There's violence involved, or maybe that kidnapping aspect, right? Something like that. But when we're talking about fraud, this is what we see a little bit more in this community. Gets a little sneaky, right? Maybe it starts with usually meeting online. We're seeing a lot of that right now. So maybe coming through online, or maybe we're just talking, right? But usually it's that deceitful behavior, some false promises somewhere in there. So maybe I am the perpetrator in this situation, and I say, oh my gosh, you are so beautiful. Oh my gosh, you dance so well. I want you to be in my music video. Very common around here. Now, for those of us that are a little bit older and have been around this area for a while, we know Concord, North Carolina, or Hickory, North Carolina, it's not necessarily like LA, right? They're not out here producing music videos like that, right? But if you're a little bit younger, then maybe you don't know that, or you don't have that context, or you think, well, maybe this person's connected, or maybe I just need to start somewhere, start my career, right? But then it gets real tricky real fast. And maybe that turns into, well, I'll just be your manager. So why don't you give me pictures and videos and all these things of yourself, and then I'm going to turn around and sell them, right? But you don't really know that. So all of these things may happen. Fraud, what we're seeing, those false promises. The other common one we're seeing is kind of that Romeo, I'm your boyfriend style, right? Of, I want to be your boyfriend. I love you so much. You're so beautiful. Why don't you send me pictures and videos? Which that in itself, if you are under the age of 18, is technically pornography. Now, if you're just taking a picture of yourself on a cell phone, that's technically pornography. Isn't that interesting? Now, if you send it, that's distribution of pornography. And also, if you're under 18, distribution of pornography of a minor. That's the part where it's illegal, right? So even though you're just isn't that interesting? Like, this is rampant in our society, and yet it's totally illegal, right? Now, our district attorney's not out there trying to prosecute our kiddos, right? But especially as parents, as grandparents, as people in the community, this is good to know, right? And for our young people, this is good to know. For our moms and dads in the room that are paying that cell phone bill, and any of those pictures are coming through, it's good to know, right? That you got them pictures and them videos on your phone. That phone is registered to you. Not a good thing, right? That's why it's important to have these conversations. So, force, fraud, I love you, send me pictures and videos. That's what we see a lot, right? So this is where we get into that exploitation. Send me pictures and videos. Is that illegal? Well, if it's a minor, yes. If it's not a minor, it's not necessarily illegal, right? We have some follow-up questions about maybe is it ethical or moral, or is that really good for you, right? That's really the question there. Is that best for you? But let's talk about when it gets illegal. Now, if we look at the definition here of a commercial sex act, it says in exchange for any item of value. Oh, sorry, I'm looking at that screen up here. So any item of value being exchanged, that's what the law says. So if someone says, oh my gosh, you're so beautiful, or you're so handsome, send me some pictures, send me some videos, right? That kind of thing. I'm not going to point out anybody here, but our young people, guys, my generation and older, we don't understand the pressure that they are under to do these things. We don't even have a clue what their world is like. So we've got to have a little grace for that too, right? This is a world we didn't have to grow up in, a world we didn't know. So if they are being pressured, or if there is pressure, send me these things. The law says in exchange for any item of value. That does not just mean money. Send me pictures or videos, or do this act for me, do this thing for me. For money, yes, that and, right? Any item of value. So what do people value? Shoes, clothes, hair, nails, jewelry, video games, right? What we're seeing now is even exchange for Bitcoin or Amazon gift cards. Prove that in court, right? But because it's any item of value, it still counts, right? So that exchange that's happening, when there's an exchange, that's what makes it exploitation. Does that make sense? All right, so when we're talking about fraud and those false promises, that generally is leading into that exploitation, which can easily lead into trafficking. So, coercion. Have any of you guys heard that word before? Yeah? Okay. Have y'all, if you don't know that word or have kind of some context for it, do you know the word blackmail? Most of us know that one, right? And so that looks like, oh, let me tell you a story. Actually, that'll be better. So we had a 13-year-old situation where her and her 13-year-old boyfriend had sent some pictures and videos back and forth. Very real in our community. For those of us that are a little bit older and don't know that, this is pressure. There is some pressure in our community to do these things, right? So these young people think this is normal, and they're sending pictures and videos back and forth. Well, little girl breaks up with little boy. Their relationship's over. They fell out of love, right? Or whatever, you know. And then he says, actually, if you don't get back together with me, I'm going to put your pictures on blast. I'm going to put you on blast. I'm going to send it everywhere, to everyone we know. And she talks to mom about it at this point. Mom says, oh, I don't know what's happening, right? I don't know how to handle this, right? Soon enough, all those pictures are dispersed to 4 different middle schools in this community. Middle schools. You have no idea the level of impact and depth of that decision in that moment, right? And so what we know about coercion, that blackmail, you see how those pictures were used? If you do this, then. Is that if then happening, right? That's that blackmail piece. We had another situation where one of our girls, she was actually not one of our typical, individuals that have a lot of those same vulnerabilities that we see over and over. She came from a two-parent home, was doing really well in school, was actually staying after school to get some additional tutoring to make sure she maintained that straight A average, right? And so she stayed after school. Mom was a little late picking her up that day. And so she decides, well, I'll just walk down to the convenience store, not far away, right? Just a couple blocks. So she goes to the convenience store, and there's this guy in there, and he starts talking to her, and he's kind of cute. She's about 14 or 15, and he's maybe 19. Like, he's not old and creepy, right? Like, she would know better than that, not to talk to him, right? But he's pretty cute, and so they start talking, and he says, well, let me hit you up. Like, let me get your number or something, right? How do I contact you? And she's like, okay, no, that's too far, right? Too far. Here's our boundaries. And so he says, okay, that's fine, no problem. But how about I just meet you here next week? We do the same thing again. I just meet you right here. Okay, that's fine. That seems safe enough, right? And so what happens? This boyfriend model, right? This fraud, this I love you begins. And he's very intentional this whole time. He knows exactly what he's doing, right? And so this manipulation starts of, I'm your boyfriend, I love you, I want to provide for all of your needs, I want to do all of these things for you. Very quickly becomes her boyfriend, all of this stuff, right? So then one day he says, okay, we've been doing this for a little bit. I want you to meet my friends. I want to go ahead and take you over to my friend's house. And she thinks, oh my gosh, I made it, right? I have arrived. He thinks I'm cool. He wants to hang out with me. He wants me to meet his friends. This is going to be awesome. This is great, right? So they get in the car, they go over, and he takes her to the neighborhood she's never been in before, and he parks in front of a house, and he says, okay, you're going to go inside, and you're going to go do these things for these people in there. And she says, no, I'm not. And he said, yes, you are. No, I'm not. Yes, you are. And at this point, he takes out a phone and shows her pictures and videos of them doing sexual acts that he was recording. She didn't know he was recording, and said, I'm going to send this to your family and your church family, your faith-based family, if you don't do this. I'm going to put you on blast and send it to everyone. Then they're going to know who you really are. She still said no. Let's be honest, most of the time at this point, most people break. Okay, fine. Let's not do that, right? The level of shame that would come with all that, nah, not playing that. Right? But she stands strong, and she said, guess you're going to do it, right? And then at that point, he got very violent and said, okay, now I'm going to force you to go in here, and if you don't do this, I'm going to make your little sister do it. And at that point, she didn't know what to do. I don't know actually what he's capable of, and how do I protect my family from him? How do I protect my little sister from this? I don't know how. I guess I'll do it. And then what tends to happen, so we pass that coercion, right? You see that blackmail and that coercion in there, threatens, all of that. Well, now we get to the place where you've already done it once. You're a prostitute now. Or you've already done it, and you're doing an illegal thing, not me, so I'm not the one getting in trouble. You would, right? Or maybe I really love you, but I need you, right? We're in some kind of crisis, and I just need you to do this one time, right, to help us out. Well, now you've already done it once. This is just a thing. It's not even a big deal anymore. Go do it again, right? And this trap and this cycle kind of facilitates over and over and over. Is this really happening? Yes. We've talked about that a bit. But here's a little heat map. Now, this is put together by one national organization. They run the National Human Trafficking Hotline, and I'll give you that phone number here in a bit. But this is a little bit of what that looks like. You see where the red is. You see where North Carolina is, or where North Carolina should be, right? Y'all, we got a problem. So what we know about this is this is not every case that exists, and this is not even every case that we know about. This is one organization that put this map together. So it helps us have a little bit of a picture, but there's a lot more than that. So let's see if we can watch this little video here, and we'll do our best. Nope. Okay. Well, we might be able to circle back at the end and watch it. But this is the way human trafficking is happening, right? So we've mentioned a few different times what that recruitment can look like. How are traffickers actually meeting people? Now, again, we work with teenage girls. This happens to boys and this happens to adults, right? But for us, most of the things I know about are going to be that teenage girl situation. So there's one thing on this list way higher than the others. And then there's a number 2 on there as well. What do you think is number 1 right now? Exactly right. Social media. So here's what happened. So a trafficker used to be able to maybe go to the mall and see this group of young people, right? And it was actually pretty sneaky. It wasn't even that one lone individual over there, right? So maybe as perpetrator, I would come up to this group and say, oh, okay, what's going on? Oh, cute shoes, cool shirt. Where'd you guys been? Oh, look at those bags. I just went to that store too. What'd you get? Right? Whatever. Who knows, right? And maybe you guys are all talking to me, but you over here are not, right? And actually, maybe she's my target. Because here's what a trafficker told us one time. He said, if I tell her she's beautiful, and she looks back at me and says, thank you, done, it's over, keep walking. But if I tell her she's beautiful, and she gives me one of these, the eyes drop, the insecurity, right? He says, I got her. And so it's even possible that I'm not just targeting this one individual over here who's all by themselves. I'm actually coming up to a group, but I'm really targeting that one, right? Maybe I add all of you on Instagram. Now I'm friends with all of you, but really I'm targeting that one, right? And so then what happened when COVID hit? And this is primarily for our young people, right? But what happened with COVID? What did we do as a society? We retreated, right? We isolated. We pulled our kids out of school and slammed them with technology, right? But what did we do? Did we teach them how to use it well or how to know safety? Not necessarily, right? Sometimes our schools tried, or sometimes our parents tried, but how many of us even could help our kids like do the math homework that they were supposed to log in and do? Like, it was complex, right? I don't know how to technologically develop, gather all that. Right, young people, you got this. And so what happened? We isolated them, we pulled them home, right? And as a parent, we thought, well, they're in their bedroom. How much safer can they be? They're at home. But the problem is we just gave them a laptop and a cell phone and an iPad and a gaming system. And we've seen traffickers use all of these things to talk to them, right? I was doing a presentation similar to this not too long ago, and someone shared a great story. She said her grandson was over at the house playing games. He's just having a good time. Then all of a sudden, he gets up, grabs her phone, and runs out the front door. She said, boy, what are you doing? Get back here, right? What are you doing? And so he comes back in, what? What are you doing? Oh, well, my friend that I was playing with, they want to see a picture of the front of the house. Right. And so you heard the little ooh around the room, right? So those of us who have been around a little bit, who grew up without cell phones and without all of this technology, we don't have the same mindset that that's okay. Our younger generations, even if I talk to like youth groups or schools about that and have that story, they don't necessarily see something wrong with that. Right? For those of us that are a little bit older, we might see there's a danger here. There's a safety issue here. You don't need to tell strangers where you live, right? That's not always a good choice, and be able to talk through that. So what we know is traffickers have adapted very quickly. So we gave a bunch of technology to our young people, and then traffickers said, well, it's a lot easier to like 10 Instagram accounts, and be friends with them rather than go up to the mall or go to the football game or go to the high school or all of those things, right? So I can target 10, and then, we'll see what happens with those 10, right, rather than just the one. So it's a lot more efficient, right? But what we have to realize also is there are so many scams and so many perpetrators and so many things out there with our young people. Even with my daughters, I'm very careful and intentional to say things like, it's not that I don't trust you. It's the 800,000 perpetrators on the other side that I don't trust, right? So if you guys don't know, Bark Technologies did this thing, so you don't have to go out and test it out yourself. You're welcome to if you want to, but it's an ugly, ugly world. But Bark Technologies, it's a tech company. They said, wow, this seems like a lot. Are y'all just being dramatic, right? Or is this really happening? And so what they did is they created a fake profile of a 15-year-old girl, gave her a little fake family, which is way more work than they ever needed to do, right? And then they went live. Are perpetrators really reaching out to young people, right? Within the first hour, 7 adult accounts reached out with very clear intentions. Within an hour, 7 different accounts. So then they said, well, this account is 15. That's a little bit older. What if we do 11? And like a young 11, likes pink, like unicorns and stuff, right? Like a young 11. Let's see what happens. Within 24 seconds, this account is being contacted, called, contacted. For those of us that are a little bit older in the room, we have no idea what kind of a world these young people are living in. The battle that they have on a regular basis, right? We don't understand, and so we also have to remember to have grace for that, right? For us, we just say, oh, go play outside, right? Remember those days? We could play outside and it was safe, right? It's just a different world. It's a different world they're living in, and we got to navigate it together. So on this list, we have social media being that number one. Gaming, we're also seeing this. This used to be a primary way to contact boys. We're also seeing this for girls. And again, talking about that Bitcoin. And sometimes we'll see that exchange being gaming incentives, right? I'll give you a code. I'll give you a way to, grow the different levels, right? Get new characters, all of these things, right? Prove that in court. But you have to understand that exchange really does count as exploitation. You can see the other ones on here. Because we work with minors, we don't see escort services and erotic massages as much. Those very much do happen in our community. All of these really do happen in our community. Again, public places and large events. You can see kind of those big events here in this area. We got the Speedway not far away. We have a lot of sports events that happen here. What we know about that demand side, the people who are buying and purchasing, is that anytime we have a lot of disposable income in one area, we have a big question mark about trafficking. There's going to be that increase in trafficking. So who are the victims? Who are the people getting caught up in trafficking? Everybody, right? We have some vulnerabilities that are common, and we'll talk about some of those things, but it really does happen to everyone. We have a very wide base of our clients. So these are some of those factors that increase the vulnerability or can increase the risk. Because if you think about these things, what happens? They just breed insecurity or trauma or these different issues, and what we see over and over and over is that perpetrator says, I can help. I can fix it. Let me help you. Let me love you, right? We've even seen some data and some statistics. When you post online, they don't understand me. I don't feel loved. I feel lonely. These type of things, perpetrators actually are drawn, and their algorithms are drawn to respond to those. And how do they respond? I love you, I understand you, I'm here for you, let me help you. Isn't that interesting? It's really the picture of love. Now, we who have kind of that faith-based perspective and know what God has designed us for, love and community, all of those things, we actually in this space can be a huge deterrent for this. So what we see, those top three, if you're not familiar with ACEs, or if you kind of work in this space, you might be familiar with this, but these are some common things that we see. Now, I will say sexual abuse is much more than 63%. This is disclosed, previous sexual abuse. So, understand that. Common myths, we've addressed some of these already. The difference between smuggling and trafficking. Smuggling does not have to be sexually related or labor related at all. Smuggling is moving across country borders. Human trafficking does not require moving across borders. You can be trafficked out of your home, right? Not all traffickers are male. There's not always physical violence involved. I can let you read these. I'm not going to read them all to you. One thing we did briefly mention, and I will state again, is usually that individual cannot recognize what's happening to them. We talked about coercion and the lies and manipulation that is involved in this, right? And so most people, even if they hear these warning signs or they see the phone number, or sometimes even in a meeting like this, they still can't recognize this is the situation I'm in. Oftentimes it's those around us that can say, actually, I'm concerned about this. Now, our adult population is much better at recognizing this than teenagers, but still, there's often a lot of manipulation.
I was wondering if you could talk a little bit more about the myth about all traffickers are males, because I know some on TV see
Yeah,
somebody might lure a child or individual.
absolutely. Great question. Yes, absolutely. We can spend some time on that. So, all traffickers being male is a huge myth. We see, like she was saying, in a lot of the media, for those of you who may not have heard her, in media, we see a lot of the times that trafficker is male. We've seen a high school cheerleader traffic other high school cheerleaders, right? Like, it can be really out of context here. We've seen a lot of cases, specifically even in Cabarrus County, Mecklenburg County. We've seen these different issues where we have female traffickers. We've also seen female recruiters, right? Where maybe we have that trafficker who's really in control of the situation, but one of those girls are now recruiting other girls, right? Now that's a problem. That's also a problem, right? Yes. Uh-huh.
Because of like the recognition of the crime,
Mm-hmm.
a lot of people, you're saying, don't recognize it because from coercion or fraud.
Yeah.
What is your advice on talking to
That's a great question. What we find is usually empathy goes a long way, compassion goes a long way, right? Where it's very easy to get defensive. It's not happening to me. You're accusing me of something that I did wrong, right? So the question was, for those of you who couldn't hear, how do you approach a situation? If you're seeing this from the outside, how do you address it, right? Sometimes if you are not familiar with the situation, if you don't know that person, it's just easiest to anonymously report. And we'll talk about how you can do that. If you are pretty close to the situation, you can have a little more conversations because there is that trust that's built, right? If you do have that trust that's built, conversation is the easiest way. Empathy is a great foot in the door, right? And even explaining a little bit more what you can see. Sometimes you're only going to get so far, right? That's not happening to me. What I'll say is typically for us, our clients have been referred to us, and they are with us on average 6 to 9 months before they ever admit, oh yeah, I guess I really was the victim of a crime. So generally, even as a friend, you may not be able to talk them through it. But what you can do is call one of these organizations and talk through it with us. And what we might be able to do is get involved in kind of a different way, right? Where is this a safety issue? What does that look like? And then we can maybe take a little bit of a different approach. Great question. So what are the warning signs of human trafficking? Well, we talked about a couple of these already, but law enforcement usually is not your friend, right? For me in my life, law enforcement hasn't been my friend. But what we do know is that if there's unusually fearful behavior of law enforcement, that can be because that trafficker is lying, right? You are the perpetrator of a crime, not me, right? We had a trafficker even tell his girls that, well, as long as you are non-compliant with law enforcement, they have to let you go because you're a minor. They can't arrest you for this, which is legally true, right? You actually can't be arrested for this. But that perpetrator, that trafficker would say, well, as soon as you're released, I'll come get you, and we just keep going, right? And so a lot of our individuals do believe that they are the victim of a crime. Law enforcement's not there to help them. This is one more reason why people will never ask law enforcement for help that are in this situation, or that we don't see it commonly. And then also inconsistencies in the story. You know, if someone's lying or manipulating, that might be true. But it also might be an issue of trauma. What we know about complex trauma is the factual information and the sensory information in your brain doesn't quite line up the same. Have y'all ever seen, like even on TV or in media or something, that like someone on the witness stand and they're just kind of all over the place? They can't quite tell the story and you're like, I don't know what's wrong with you right now, but it's not how it went, right? We all can see that much. Well, sometimes it's just complex trauma, right? The brain cannot actually chronologically put all of those things back together. That factual information and that sensory information generally lines up well, but when there's complex trauma, sometimes the brain isn't working and communicating that way. So what we see a lot, especially with our individuals, is if they're trying to tell a chronological story, it may not be that they're lying to you or manipulating. It's just tough stuff to talk about, right? If they're overly tired, sometimes our young people are just tired, right? We like sleeping. But if there's overly tired, that's a concern, right? So what we have seen is a trafficker, I think she was 16, and mom would put her to bed at like 10 p.m. or so every school night, you know, and when your kid's 16, who goes back and checks on them after, right? You don't, like, she's in bed, right? But reality is trafficker would come and pick her up about 10:30. She would crawl out her window, off she goes. He traffics her all night, drops her off at 5:30 in the morning, and mom wakes her up at 6 for school. That can only happen so long before we're overly tired, right? Something's happening. We had a situation where a school principal called us and noticed, you know, actually one of these kids is falling asleep in my class all day, every day. I don't know what's happening. We need to investigate. Sure enough, trafficking, right? If they're not able to come and go freely, one thing I do want to emphasize on this list is those multiple cell phones. If you got multiple cell phones, we could talk after. Sometimes it's job related, sometimes there's a professional reason for that, right? Sometimes there's a really not so great reason for that, right? Here's what we do know, is a trafficker will say, you know what, you don't need to tell anyone else about me. You and I just can have a special relationship. We can just talk to each other, that kind of thing. So how about this? I'll give you a phone so mama doesn't know what we're talking about, right? They're all trying to watch on you. I understand you unlike anybody else, so why don't I just communicate directly with you on this phone? We had, I think she was an 8th grader. She came home one day and had a second cell phone. And her mom said, oh, well, she said her friend gave it to her. I don't know about y'all, but ain't nobody out here handing me free iPhones. Okay? Like, this is a red flag. This is concerning.
We had a question back here.
Perfect.
I was just wondering if the older population is at risk also.
Just to make sure the question was, is all the population at risk?
The older
Older population. Great question. So I think there probably are other people in the community who could answer that more in depth because we primarily work with teenagers, but the answer is yes. Yes, 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 there is a vulnerability there. I think what we've seen the most is it's hard to recognize manipulation because things have changed so much and our younger people are quicker to adapt sometimes, especially with that online. If you even just think about how much scams have increased in the last year or two. Y'all have gotten those scams of like, oh, your bank account, something, something. You spent this on PayPal, right? Like, or you're getting phone calls. Have y'all recognized the increase in this? Sometimes our young people are much better at recognizing these things than we are. Our young people can recognize a fake profile much faster than we can, right? I'm like, oh, it's my long-lost cousin from somewhere, right? And then my daughter's like, no, it's not. Right? Mom, right? And so, yes, all of our, we do have that vulnerability still. It just looks a little bit different. Frequent runaways, what we know, the Department of Justice issued a statistic that runaways, 1 in 3 runaways will be approached within 72 hours by a trafficker. And here's what that looks like, especially around the transit station. Y'all know the transit station here in Charlotte, right? That's one of those popular places because the buses all come here, and now what do? Right? So I ran away, and now I'm here, and now where am I going to go? I got to figure this part out, right? And so sometimes people end up there, but I'll tell you that place is also swarming with perpetrators because they know this. Oh, you look lost. You look like you need some food. You look like you haven't eaten for a while. Well, we just go get some food and talk. What's going on? Well, my mom's being a jerk. All these things, we had to fight, so I just went. Wow, that's awful. That really sucks. So you really don't have anywhere to go. No, I don't. Well, why don't you just come hang out with me, right? Why don't you just stay the night with me? I'll help you figure it out, right? And this can be somebody your same age, right? It doesn't have to be that older male, right, to the young female. This is where it gets a little untraditional, and we can see those different situations play out, right? So maybe, okay, I'll just stay with you for one night, and then maybe I can figure it out, right? I can figure out what to do after that. Okay, so we go and we stay, and then actually, you know what? We got along really well. We actually had fun. You're a pretty cool person. You're easy to live with. So like, why don't you just stay here for a few weeks? Great, because I need somewhere to stay, right? But then after a few weeks, you know what? You've been staying at my house. You've been eating my food. Now you owe me for it. And here's what I need you to do. And that is what we see a lot happening in that area. Unusual behavior. This is one of those big ones that you're going to hear a warning sign for a lot of different things. Not one of these means it's human trafficking, but we do have this warning sign for a lot of different things. If there's sudden massive behavior changes, maybe you're the life of the party and then all of a sudden become very isolated and quiet and not engaging with people. Or vice versa. Maybe I was really introverted and quiet and now suddenly I'm the life of the party. What happened? What happened in your life that created such a big behavior shift? And maybe it's just, some things going on at home or, maybe there's some valid reasons for that and that's okay. But also that's one of those concerning things that is not typical. And then if there's bragging about having a lot of money, sometimes what a perpetrator or trafficker will do is say, oh, join me and we can make money together. I'll facilitate, I'll set it up, and then you can make money too, right? But the reality is that trafficker is making 10 times the amount of money this individual is making, right? One other thing that we'll mention briefly here is tattoos and branding. Branding we don't see a ton of in this community. Tattoos are more common. And really the point of this is to show that ownership, right? This is my property. So what we do see in this community sometimes names or certain symbols, but it's not super common here. And this one, I will sit for just a moment and actually maybe an awkwardly long time. I would love for you to take out your phone and put this number in it. So this phone number is the National Human Trafficking Hotline phone number. It's the one you never need, but you want to have, right? Or you can take a picture of it and do it later if you'd like. You can call this number. It can be anonymous. You can text them. You can live chat them. You can send them an email, and it can all be anonymous. So the beautiful thing about this one is you can just talk it through, right? They're the professionals, you're not. What we do like to tell the community, we had this question earlier, if maybe you recognize a situation and you want to get involved, but you don't know how, what we do say is call these guys and talk it through, right? If it's your friend, they can kind of help guide that. If it's not somebody you know, maybe you're out at lunch or you're out at dinner after this event, right? And you're like, I see those multiple cell phones on the table. Looks like someone's really controlling the other person. Something seems off here. My gut tells me, right? Maybe the Holy Ghost inside is saying something, right? Like something's not right. This is a great number you can reach out to. And you can just report a tip, right? It works like a tip line. So here's the beautiful thing about calling this number instead of calling us. It's national. So maybe tonight you go out to dinner, you see the situation, and you call them up, right? Or you text them or whatever. They talk through it. Okay, why are you suspicious about this situation? What do you think's going on? You talk to them, you tell them, here's a description of the people, here's a license plate number, I don't know. And they say, you know what? Thank you so much for calling, but this is not enough information for us to actually investigate. So thank you, but have a good rest of the night. Please don't get involved. That's probably what they're going to say because it's a safety issue for everybody, including the victim in that situation, right? It can get a lot worse for that individual. So we play it cool, you pray for them, and you go on about your life. But maybe tomorrow they end up in Atlanta, right? Because sometimes there is some changes and there is some movement. So maybe tomorrow, in Atlanta, Miss Erilyn sees them and says, oh, you know what? Something ain't right here. And she calls this line, right? Because it's that national line, they can pull up that information. You know what? Just yesterday in Charlotte area, we got a tip about this. Now we can investigate. Now we have enough information to actually do something and take next steps about it. Fantastic. And they will tell you, thank you so much. Have a great day. FBI is doing it, right? Or law enforcement's involved, or whoever needs to be is now involved. They'll also call present age if it's a minor suspected in trafficking, those kind of things. So, did everybody get this number? Perfect. And again, you can web chat them, also online. So we have just a few minutes here. I'll stick around for questions if you want to talk through more situational things at the end, but let me know.
I have a question about the underage children. I had a question about sexting, the information underage. Number one, I know that's pornography, but what is the penalty if the girl were to send the boys the explicit pictures and it's noted?
Great question. So this is one of my favorite topics. And without staying here for an hour, let me point you to some resources, right? Because it gets a little complex, exactly like you're saying. What if it's unsolicited information? Or what if it's, like, there's some complexities to it, which is a really, really great point. So what I would recommend, Ashley Shanley, who's the district attorney of Cabarrus County up in Concord, she has done a webinar on this, basically, and it's accessible to everyone and anyone. It's on our YouTube channel. It's really easy to find. And that's what I would say is going to be a great overview of that information and talking through a little bit more specifics. Also, we have some resources for parents there. There's one specifically about, from the Child Advocacy Center, Pat's Place. They did one about how to protect online. So maybe we want to defer a little bit of that in our household, right? I got a teenage girl at home. And so what do? Well, maybe we turn that router off at night, or maybe we put cell phones in the kitchen at night, right? There's some strategies there for parents as well that you may not know on the technology side. So, great question. Anybody else? I appreciate my volunteers running around that microphone. You all are doing a great job. I also appreciate my tech team. You guys are amazing. Yeah.
How involved are a lot of these youth as far as abuse, exploitation, their involvement with pornography?
Fantastic question. How involved are the youth in this space involved with pornography? It is extremely prevalent, and I think a lot of it has to do with access to technology. So when we do our prevention programming and we go into schools or we talk to youth groups or we talk to young people, period, pornography is one of the 4 main things we talk about. Access to technology, cultural influences, we have to address those things as well, but it's extremely prevalent. We also see traffickers will use this as kind of training tools, if you will, and we often see, because it is such a normalized thing in our society, that our young people are getting more accustomed to it, used to it. This is not a foreign thing, this is not a taboo thing, and so when someone online asks me for videos or pictures, what's the big deal, right? I see this all the time. It's not that big of a deal to just send a picture. Does that make sense? Mm-hmm. Great question.
So I have one question. So when you say, so are some of these let's say, perpetrators, could they be in, let's say, New Jersey or, I don't know, another country per se, but then they're like pursuing them on the internet and asking for pictures, and then we get into this whole thing with, I send you a picture, you send me a picture, and then now we're just having pictures. Is that the form of trafficking that we're talking about or we're seeing?
Great question. So picture for picture would not necessarily be trafficking, but can easily be exploitation. And a lot of times that's the pathway that we're seeing. Yes, they can absolutely be out of town, out of state, out of country. We even have seen, here's kind of how that pathway plays out, right? We had a situation where one of our young girls met somebody online. He's in New York, right? Oh, well, you know what? He's my boyfriend. I love him. He loves me. You know, all the things, right? Because he says all the right things, and maybe it really seems like it. It's hard to know sometimes, right? And so guess what? He buys her a ticket. Why don't you just come on up here to me? And so this minor says, yes, okay, gets that ticket, up she goes, right? If y'all don't know, there's a bus system around here that does not require much information. And so that's a big problem for those going up to New York, right? Our traffickers and perpetrators know all of this. And so, oh, she's gone. Well, we know she ran away. Our local FBI and local police department know she's missing. They can't find her. Our detectives can't find her. We don't know what happens. Praise God, actually some of our young people will post on Instagram, selfie, right? And they were like, oh, that's where she is. So that's helpful sometimes. But what we also knew with her, okay, someone has purchased this ticket. We see that her phone activated. Okay, she's on her way to New York. So our FBI team was able to call New York FBI, and they intercepted her before she got into this situation with this individual. So does this happen? Absolutely. And that's usually kind of what that pathway will look like. As long as that individual is willing to take the next steps, that perpetrator or trafficker absolutely will encourage it. So I really appreciate y'all's time tonight. Any other question real quick before we wrap up?
Yes. Is information such?
How prevalent among young males? Great question, and it's really hard to get data around that. So it's really hard for us to get data around females because we don't have a common methodology of people self-identifying. So it's very hard and complex to get that with females. So what happens with males? We have that next layer of shame, right? And cultural context that plays all into this. I can't tell you how many times we've had these conversations, and then a male says, men can't be abused. Okay, I'm here to tell you that's not true, right? There's a lot of things that play into that, and so it's much, much harder to identify males, and oftentimes harder for them even to come forward. So data's pretty hard on that to gather, and so I would leave a big fat question mark, but we know it is happening, and again, we want to be able to help facilitate those conversations when we can. I think there's a question back here.
Yeah. This information is quite interesting, and it's like an eye-opener. Is this information shared in schools also? Yes?
Yes. Yes, it is. So talking about schools specifically, we have such a problem in North Carolina, it is actually legally mandated that it is taught in 7th and 8th grade classrooms. So if you know anyone in that age range and they're not being taught in schools, which sometimes schools don't even know that, right? Sometimes they're still not there. We will come and teach that content for free. We meet all of those state standards. We can provide it to the teachers and they can teach it. And usually they just say, it's all right, you guys do it, right? And then we can come in and talk about it. So yes, there is a lot of information for schools. I believe it's legally mandated. I think as long as it's not homeschool, I know that's kind of the loophole that we've seen, but overall public schools. I think so. Yes. Yes.
Okay, so I had a situation when I was like 16 in high school where this girl around my age, she was telling us in class that her boyfriend was like 21 and that her parents knew about it. And she actually brought her mom to school and they were like talking about it. Would you recommend someone my age back then to still call even if the parent is like, oh, quote unquote okay with it? But I mean, like, that's a big, I even knew at 16, like, that's inappropriate for you to be with a 21-year-old, like.
That's awesome. What a great situation. So if you don't mind, we'll keep it pretty confidential, so don't share her name or anyone's names or anything. But what are those red flags that you just told us? So tell me a few of those red flags that you saw that you were like, something's not right.
I mean, she was overly bragging about things that she knew she wasn't supposed to be doing at our age, like drinking and stuff like that, or like being out late. That she was
Perfect.
able to do with him, but obviously she knew she wasn't able to do that like with her parents. And I'm pretty sure that her mom didn't necessarily know that kind of stuff either, because I mean, what would you really be telling us for if that was the case?
Right. That's a great, perfect. So what I just heard you say was older boyfriends and bragging about wild parties, right?
Yeah.
So we do recognize these things. There's something in you. You recognize older boyfriends. Okay, something's not quite right here. Even at 16, you're thinking something's not quite right. What I will say is we have had even generational issues where parents are traffickers, and then the next generation grows up and traffics their children, and the next generation grows up and traffics their children. So sometimes just because a parent doesn't say this is not acceptable doesn't mean it's okay, right? That's a fantastic question. So what I would say is yes, somebody in the community needs to get involved in that situation, because sometimes parents have their own trauma, have their own issues, have their own lack of boundaries, all of those things, right? None of us are perfect. We all are the same at the foot of the cross, right? We're all coming short, right? But what we can do as a community is step into those situations and say, even though your family seems to think this is okay, from the outside it seems like something's not, let's get some help. So that tip line would be a great resource for that situation.
Okay, I also have a question. So, human trafficking. So I guess I'll do a little story too. I was working at my job, and this girl, she was explaining how that she no longer had a relationship with her mom because her mom used to like I guess sell her to her boyfriends or whoever the mom was dating or talking to at the time for extra money or drugs or whatever.
Sure.
And even had her experiment for drugs to make sure it was safe before she took them herself. So she was just explaining the bad relationship with her mom, and how she not overcame it, but she's no longer in that situation. Like she's out of it. Like that's why she's working the job, has her independent money or whatnot. But however, there was still some behaviors that I can tell that I don't know if it's a direct result, but it's definitely affected her. Like she was so ready to find someone to like settle down and get married to, like after meeting them for like 4 months. Or it was like a month and a half or something that she knew him. They started talking about marriage, and they actually did get married and then divorced again. And it was like some of those behaviors. So after effects, like how would you deal with them? Like she's out of the actual trafficking situation, but that still is affecting her life. So
Fantastic comment. What we do often, so we have wraparound services, right? What that means is we're going to walk through life with you for a while, right? So on average, it takes 6 to 9 months to even realize I was a victim of the crime. Somebody used me, right? This didn't go well. And then we can take those next steps eventually and start addressing the vulnerabilities that got us here, right? Well, maybe my mama did these things, or my daddy did these things, or my parents weren't around or didn't do these things, right? And that's where we can kind of start working through that. One thing at Present Age, we provide free counseling, which can help kind of process through some of that and bring that back to center, right? All of our services at Present Age are free. We provide wraparound services. Sometimes that starts with that very basic, are you safe at home? Yes or no, right? And we work from there. Then we'll do that medical side. Do we need STD, STI testing, pregnancy testing, any of those things? We can approach that and dig into that a little bit. General needs, do you have food? Are you secure in that way, right? Do you know where your next meal is coming from? Or do we need to meet some needs here, right? What we also see sometimes is those traffickers will be meeting those needs. If that trafficker is providing food to you, and then we as Present Age can provide food to you instead, we just eliminated that vulnerability, right? You don't need him. You got support from the community in a different way, right? And that's one of those ways that our community here can also support each other that way, where we don't want that trafficker seeing this vulnerability and addressing it. We want to be the ones to help each other, right? And have that community.
So my question was, anybody have any other questions before? I would like this to be the last one, unless anybody have.
Perfect.
Oh, okay, so we'll have her be the last question.
Perfect.
But my question was, I know they have survivors of human trafficking. I'm not sure if you talked about, I don't recall you saying anything about, have it ever been a result of death if somebody never came out and they died as a result? And what's the statistics with that? Does it have any data on that information?
Great question. So what we know, and I can't remember exactly where the statistic came from, but it's floated around for a long time now that we know this is very common in this space. on average, your average age of entry into human trafficking is between 12 and 14 years old. So let's say 13, right? That's on par for present age on the national level. So on average, what we know is they are in this life for 7 years, and they don't get out and get free. Less than 2% are rescued. And so what that means is that 7 years is actually the lifespan. Once you enter into this life, if you don't get out, you have 7 years on average. So if they enter at 13 plus 7, we got a very short lifespan. So that's a great question. That's what we're seeing happen statistically if there's not involvement or anybody rescuing or any getting involved from the externally. So I think there might have been one more question back this way. Is that right? Nope, perfect. Well, I appreciate you all so much for coming out. If you need any more of our information, I will leave it up here. Sorry, I never quite got that far. But my name is Cami Biastes. You can always reach out to me at Present Age Ministries. It's a lot easier to spell info at Present Age Ministries, and that'll get to one of us as well. If you need to make a referral, if you wanted to say, you know, I know of a situation and we need some help, we need someone to get involved, our website, www.presentageministries.org. There's a button front and center that says need help. Make a referral to us and we'll contact you and talk through it. What's going on? How can we get in help? And even if it's something that Present Age doesn't do, maybe it's an adult or something like that, there are community resources where we can meet those needs and kind of get involved and support in different ways. So really appreciate you all letting me come out and speak. I'm here if you have more questions or want to talk through anything. Thank you all so much.
Awesome.
Thank you so very much, Cami. Give another round of applause. Very informational. But before we do a closing prayer, it's not much. I want to give you a token of appreciation for your time. I know they say you don't have to, but I just want to give us, from the young people here at Northeast, want to give you a little card.
Thank you so much.
And I know we didn't do this earlier, but I do want to thank Berean for coming and joining us this evening. Thank you all so very much. So if we would stand, we're going to go ahead and close out. We're going to have a closing prayer. Well, announcement. 1 second.
Take your seats, please, for just 1 second. We have a quick announcement for Sister Sweeney here. As she stated, her birthday was earlier. We have a presentation coming up on the screen.
Happy birthday, Miss Ellen. We love you. I appreciate everything you do.
I just know you're looking beautiful today. I want to wish you a happy birthday and blessings.
Brother Daryl.
Happy birthday, E. How old are you? 22, 23?
We don't see anything else on the
It's right here,
screen.
baby. Happy birthday, Erilyn. Happy birthday, Miss Erilyn.
Happy birthday, Ellen. That's my daughter. I love her.
Happy birthday, Erilyn. We love you. Happy birthday, Auntie Erilyn.
Happy birthday, Miss Ellen. We love you. I appreciate everything you do.
I just know you're looking beautiful today. I want to wish you a happy birthday and blessings.
Happy birthday, E. How old are you? 22, 23? It's right here, baby. Happy birthday, Erilyn. Happy birthday, Miss Erilyn.
Happy birthday, Ellen. That's my daughter. I love her.
Happy birthday, Erilyn. We love you. Happy birthday, Auntie Erilyn. All right, have a good one.
Happy birthday to the true MVP, Erilyn Sweeney. Hope you have many more, and we're rooting for you for Federation President.
All right.
Happy birthday, Erilyn. Happy birthday, Erilyn.
Happy birthday, Erilyn. All right, let me do it. All right, go ahead. Happy birthday, Erilyn. I hope you have an awesome birthday. 75 never looked so good on anybody except you. You working, you killing it. Happy birthday.
Happy birthday, Erilyn. We appreciate you so much. You do so much for the youth here in the church. We love you for that. Love you. Love you.
Happy birthday.
to you. Happy birthday, Sister Erin. Hope you are having a great day. Hoping you have a great birthday. Want to thank God for allowing you to see so many years, like a lot of years. So just wanting to, say happy birthday. Love you, Sister Erin. Happy birthday. Happy birthday, love you.
All right. You give us a count us in.
Thank you so much. And this is why I love them so much. Thank you, young people. Okay, so I appreciate it. I wish y'all would actually sing, DJ. No. Okay. But anyways, thank you all so much. You can stand now? Okay, now y'all can stand for a closing prayer. Thank you. So
You have announcements?
Oh, announcements. So next week, the Pathfinders will be leading out for Pathfinders. We won't have joint AY next week. We're going to go ahead and have a meeting so we can plan accordingly for the rest of the year. And any Pathfinder announcements? Okay. And February 4th is Caribbean Day here at Northeast. So please, yes. So please come on and support that February 4th for Caribbean Day. And February 11th, we have a special program for AY. We have a Black History play that we're doing called Going Under. And following that, we will be having a poetry night. And if y'all love poetry, you want to come on out, is from ages 15 and up. There is a sunset. There is a $5 fee to enter. It's a fundraiser that we're having. So, and if you know anything about poetry, the first poetry laureate of Charlotte, North Carolina, he will be here. And he will be featuring 3 of his pieces for us. Also, we have different presentations, also some locals that will be presenting as well. So please come on out and support. This is the flyer. That is the guy, Junius J. Ward. So we are still accepting poets, actually teenagers. So if you have a teenager child or know someone in school that does poetry, please let myself know, Naya or Joshua Symes. Please, they can still enter. It's free to enter the poetry night, the presentation that is, but to present, but it's $5 to get in. The doors open at 6:15 p.m., but we start at 7 o'clock. Okay, and it will be lounge style, lights off like you're going to a poetry night event as well. So, and you will have light refreshments that will be free to eat. You don't have to pay for that. So please, come on, the attire is chic. Yes. So, any other announcements? Elder, pastor, any announcements? Food fair on the 4th. Okay, there was a food fair that evening after the sunset on the 4th for Caribbean Day. We'll be closing out by AJ.
Let us pray. Dear Heavenly Father, thank you for this day. Thank you for life. Thank you for strength. Thank you for allowing us to all come here today and learn and to allow us to come here today and be informed about human trafficking and how to stay safe. And I do pray that we all get home safely. In Jesus' name I do pray. Amen.
Amen. Consider yourself dismissed. Thank you so very much. Thank you so much.
Thank you so much.